Welcome to Conversations on Embodied Awakening. I'm Prajna, and today my guest is Ananta Kranti, and I'm speaking to her from California, and she is in Thailand. Welcome, Ananta.
Thank you.
Yes.
Welcome to you also.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to our conversation. We've been planning this for a little while, so why don't we go ahead and get started with some questions.
Okay, fire away.
First of all, you have a curious story. We have similarities in our stories, as we've discussed, and in many ways people can have all different kinds of prisons that they end up in, yes?
Yes.
And you actually ended up in a particular type of prison for a couple of years. And during that time, some things happened for you. First of all, maybe say just a little bit. We don't need to hear the whole story, but whatever you want to share about how it was that you ended up there and what happened for you while you were there in the way of awakening. Like, how did that bring you to a wider view of who you are?
Okay. How did I end up there? I'll try to cut that story short. So, deeply inside, I was at a point in my life where everything that I was seeing, playing in the world, just looked like so too much for me. It was like deeply inside a calling for everything to just stop, for silence. There was this calling, and on the outside, in the reflection, in the life play, it was madness, and I was just about to step into a whole load of more madness. My first searching for freedom, I thought that freedom was out there. I thought that freedom was about the material world, how I would live in the material world. And so I searched for freedom out there. And I thought that freedom would be in money, having lots of money. Mm-hmm. And I was attracted to rich men. And I got together with a billionaire sheikh and flew all around the world with him in private jets and got into drugs, cocaine, and got quite heavily into that with him for a few years, until a point came where I knew that this is not freedom. Doesn't matter how much money you've got, doesn't matter how many jets you're flying around the world, this is not freedom. I was entering the door of suffering. Mm-hmm. And so I knew, a deep calling in me knew that I have to go far away and start again. And with that knowing, I left and came to Thailand 26 years ago. I'm still here. But I left to go for 3 months to heal from this drug abuse.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yes.
So I came, and in that 3 months, I realized that this must be freedom, like nature and just being so free to just be naked and dance and everything. Like, this must be freedom. I'm not going back. So I talked to a few girls who were working in Japan a few months of the year. And they were going and working in businessmen's clubs, lighting cigarettes, pouring drinks, teaching English in these situations and getting paid lots of money. So I said, okay, I'll do that. And off I went to Japan, and I started that. So I was in Japan for a few years doing that. Every year I would go and do that.
Okay.
And that man was still in my life in the background, whereas I was no longer, there was love is what was left, because there really was a true meeting of love. We were both calling freedom. He was calling freedom from that world too. Mm-hmm. So our relating continued, but by fax. We didn't have internet at that time, so by fax, and then he would call me to Egypt, and I'd go off for 2 weeks and meet him in Egypt. And anyway, it got to a point where he asked me to, he was getting sick, and he asked me to marry him. And I was like, oh my God, I've got all this freedom and all this thing. Why would I do that? So I said, I don't know. First, I need to go to Pune. I went to Pune and fell in love with Osho and the truth that was coming through him, recognized my master, which at that time was the interpretation that it's out there. I was still believing it's out there. And I told that man that I would come back and make an arrangement with him, but after I took sannyas. So that night I took sannyas, a big celebration of 500 people dancing and singing and celebrating. It was the highest moment of my life, really surrendering the past and taking on a new name, Ananta, and leaving everything behind. And in the morning I received a fax that that man had left his body. So that was like the shock from the highest celebration to the biggest hit, and that shock really blew me open and stopped my mind. And I went through some really deep process with that, and then I knew that to keep living the way I want to live, I need to go to Japan one more time, because now his backup was gone.
So you had to get on your feet then. So you went to Japan.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, yeah, I went to Japan, and I knew that this has to be the last time. It has to be. I cannot do this anymore. I was already getting called into spiritual work, learning massage, learning shiatsu, divine healing, all this stuff. So it was as if one part of me was moving into a new frequency, Ananta, and the old part of me, which belonged all to my old name and life, which was Kerry, was still involved with people and things in the drug scene. And I was like this, like I was getting pulled. And I knew that this has to be the last time in Japan. I cannot do this anymore, working in these clubs, drinking alcohol, entertaining. And I have to really do it, like full on, get enough money, go build a house and settle in Thailand.
So then something happened.
I allowed somebody to leave something in my apartment, a bunch of LSD. It was there 5 days, and then I was raided by 15 guys. And then the moment I was arrested, in that moment, the moment the handcuffs went on, I had a picture of Osho in the corner with his eyes, and when they were swarming all over my flat searching, I looked into those eyes and I knew that this was it, that this was going to change my whole life. The knowing was there. And so I was arrested and straight away put into a very, I can only call it mad process, you know. From that moment I had 21 days of interrogation through translators. All day, every day. It was like a test of how far it could push me before I would go mad. You know, it was 21 days of interrogation before they assess what unit they're going to put you in next. And then once they put me in that next unit, it was another test of madness. And it was a continuous test of madness, and if I would start to tell you all that story, it would take forever.
How would you describe like what happened? Was it a continuous building up of something, or was there a moment of
both? Mm-hmm. And what I can tell you is, because recently I found a book that I was writing in those first days, and I was amazed to read it, really, because from the very start I was there in the deepest place. I was there as a witness, seeing it all happen to nobody, seeing it all happen to somebody apparently, and the person that it was all happening to was in immense stress. So the writing was in some moments from this deepest place of witnessing it all, mm-hmm. and seeing the process and seeing through the process. And another part of the writing was from the madness that was going on in the body. Mm-hmm. A little bit like your book, actually. I read a few. Yeah, just in this moment it goes, oh yeah. Uh-huh. So you know what I mean. Yeah, so it was there at the same time, mm-hmm. from the very beginning. Mm-hmm. I just wasn't aware in that moment. I hadn't like shifted totally into identification with the seeing.
Yes.
I was
back and forth.
Back and forth. Yeah.
It was. Yeah. Oh, it was. Okay. Yeah. So you were in a cell by yourself?
Yeah. But when I was moved from the 21 days, I was with a few others. And then when I was moved to the next place, I was with 7 foreigners, including Japanese, but they were all speaking Japanese in one cell. And that started to make me feel like I would go crazy. Uh-huh. And I was going to be there 5 months on trial. So I asked somebody, what are those cells over there? I could see these single cells. And they said it's for the crazy ones. And in that moment, I started screaming like crazy. And they came and they got me and they took me there. So from then on, I was solitary.
Mm-hmm. And you seem to enjoy that better than being...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I was there for my own deep process. I knew that from the first moment.
Yes. Well, you know, one of the questions that people are asking is there's many people that go to prison of all sorts. So it seems from what you've said already that you already had it was almost as if your destiny had been shown to you in a sense through your, even before you came. And would you say that it was your yearning to know the truth of this life, I think was how you phrased it, which Absolutely. Is kind of what makes a difference between someone who's just doing time and somebody who's being sentenced for some time, but seeing it as a doorway in a sense. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. That was from the very first second, I knew it was all about that.
Mm-hmm. So how would you speak to people? I know that you talk to people all the time.
Yeah.
And just this whole sense of, for instance, people who get into really stuck places, call it a self-made prison, or call it something where they just feel they have no control over it. So what is the way out? Where is the doorway in a situation like that?
Well, in the first place, the people I speak to are coming to me in the first place for the calling, for freedom. Right? So I know that if they've come to me, they've come with that calling.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah?
So there's a reassurance in that.
Absolutely. They don't come to me if they don't want to go for the truth. There's no point, So then I'm going for that. And the first thing that I always start with really is to investigate to who is this all happening, to know who you are. It's the first place I start with people, is to bring the recognition, the recognition of what they already know, just like I already knew at the beginning of my sentence, yet I couldn't relax into that. I was still identified with all that was happening in the body and the mind.
Mm-hmm.
But still, I was able to know a place in me that could see,
Mm-hmm.
that could see it from a wider, let's say, from a free place.
Mm-hmm.
I was already aware of that. So I know when the people come to me, they are ready to recognize that in themselves. They already are tasting it. They just are still caught up in the identification with the small self.
Mm-hmm.
So my first pointing and my first invitation is to let's go and really find out through direct experience, not through my teaching, because my teaching has nothing, cannot be a validation for anything, for anybody else. It's through your own looking within your own self what is really, really true is the only way to come to know freedom in jail.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't have a teacher. I did have Osho's books,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't have somebody guiding me or teaching me except for that. And what I had was extreme suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I had what was being revealed in that suffering was something that cannot be taken. That, you know, I was being mentally tortured by other prisoners in the silence.
Uh-huh.
I was being really aggressed by guards, mentally, not physically, but it was having a physical effect. It was all happening in a field of silence that nobody could see. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, I was feeling like they've taken it all. They've taken it all. There's nothing more to take. And within that, I came to realize what cannot be taken and what is still able to smile.
Mm.
So that's what I call freedom in jail. In anybody that's not going to a physical material prison, but within their own system, there is always a place which is still able to know itself as not suffering, as able to smile, where a place of looking without the sufferer is calling
Mm-hmm.
itself home.
Mm.
So my working with people is always to bring them into the direct living experience of that first.
Mm. Yeah.
And when they come to taste this first, if you know very well that when they come to taste that first, the looking at everything else that's arising can happen from a new vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you just said a lot there. It's very rich. So let's kind of underline a little bit about what you said. So would
Okay.
you say that the suffering, we can both speak about this from our own experience, that the suffering can actually sharpen this listening, like this
Absolutely.
place, this place that cannot be taken, that cannot
Absolutely.
be touched.
Absolutely.
That when you feel like everything's been stripped away,
yes.
what hasn't been stripped away.
Yes.
And this is really beautiful because there's many people that will listen to this that actually are still in a place of suffering. Even though there's, and even just that they're alive, I believe anyone that is alive has the seed of enlivenment. I call it enlivenment, enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, awakening. It's in all of us, you know, from the beginning. So that's kind of propelling the system forward for freedom in all of these different ways, even if it looks like it's going through addiction or some form of suffering. But I think there are a lot of people who suffer and who are in addiction of different sorts. I have family members like that.
Me too.
That somehow have an idea. Still, it's like, how does that idea get unpacked? The idea of worthiness. You know, like sometimes it really comes, what I hear over and over again, it comes down to, I'm not worthy. You know, it's like, and not really believing that there is something that hasn't been touched.
Yes.
So I hear what you're saying when people come to you and they come to me. I mean, they've already worked through something to get into the door. But what is the message for those who feel that, you know, how does a person come to that sense of worthiness?
I feel that so deeply in my heart, because it's also in my family, you know. And I can't, within my family, there are those people who have not come to even to the search, and I can't reach and I can't teach until there's a readiness to really look at the suffering as the suffering is the greatest teacher I've ever known, I've ever met. And just by asking a few questions, I would ask those people directly a few questions about what the suffering has so far shown them. Because when they start to see that what the suffering has actually so far already shown them, then I would ask, from where are you able to see that? And I would go really slowly to come to reveal a place where you are receiving the teaching of the suffering. Is that place ever not good enough? Could it ever not be good enough? The place from where you are seeing, is it ever not good enough? You know, I would go really start with the story and enter through the story. What so far has been learned through the suffering? Is there anything that you can be grateful for that the suffering has shown you so far?
Yeah. I remember that, you know, when I was coming off of some heavy stuff and my friend brought me to my first teacher and she had me write. That was the first thing she had me do. What was it? To write something that I was grateful for and all of those experiences, to find what part of it could I pull away, what could I take from that and be grateful for. And that started to open me up to kindness.
To the heart.
And I really love what you're saying, because I think that the first thing is meeting a person where they're at, whatever the story is, to really welcome the totality of that, the suffering and everything that comes with it, with the greatest kindness. Like you said, you said Osha, you know, how you mentioned Osha and what you were coming out of, what you remembered was his eyes. You know, so even just when a person can take in that much kindness, it goes a long way.
Absolutely.
You know, that look of compassion. It goes
not just awareness, but the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all have a heart, and we are all in essence the same heart, and when the heart speaks and the heart meets, it is one. There is not one heart which is more or less than the other. And how, from that energy, could it ever be not good enough?
Right, exactly. Yeah. And the heart, it seems that the heart is hooked up to the nervous system. Like as soon as a softening can happen in the heart, the nervous system can start to slow down and can integrate a new piece of information, so that we're coming out of that fight, fright, freeze, fight, flight, freeze, that the system is firing and firing and firing and can't stop. So even with my sister, I love my sister dearly. One of my all of them. I have 4 sisters, but one of them, and I have 3 brothers, and I'm in the middle. I was always in the middle of all of it. But my one sister, for a while, we weren't very close because she actually married somebody in prison. She got married.
What?
She got married in prison.
Wow.
Yeah, and later when she came out, I got her back to living with my mother, and she started working as a bartender. And I remember that I wasn't going to let something had grown in me, where I was no longer afraid. Somehow I wasn't afraid to meet her anymore where she is. And I think up until that point I was afraid, because it was so heartbreaking. When you love somebody and you see them in a place that you want them to be somewhere different. I went to visit my home one time, and I remember she was behind the bar, and I could feel that, her leather jacket and all that. And
you mean to visit her in the prison?
No, be in the bar room.
Oh,
in a salon.
That bar.
Yeah,
not that bar.
Yeah,
that bar.
And I went and I saw her, and as soon as I saw her, my body just propelled over the bar. I just dove right over it and jumped to the other side and just hugged her. And she couldn't, because she wouldn't come near me. And so I embraced her, and I just was like, I love every part of you, whatever it is. And that was the beginning of a big change for me and for her.
Yeah.
It brings me to this final question, because it really addresses this people that are close to us that suffer, and even if they aren't, just the world in general, the appearance of it. And you know as well as I do that there are teachings that sometimes float around in the non-dual circles about there's nobody here, it's an illusion anyways, and it's just your story, it's not really happening, so you can just bypass it and forget about it. Well, we know that doesn't work, that doesn't feel like it has any empathy or compassion or reality to it.
Yes.
So here's somebody typed up this question. I'm just going to read it direct.
Okay.
How do we integrate the non-dual teaching of the importance of doing nothing, like there's nothing to do, with responding with compassion to the suffering in the world? So how do we integrate those 2 teachings? That there's nothing to do and there is suffering in the world.
Okay. So there's nothing to do for the ego. There's nothing to do for the separate sense of identity who thinks that it's got to fix everything. There's nothing to do with that programmed self that thinks it's a somebody who can change the world. Yet, when you're moving from being, because it all depends on where you're moving from. When you're moving from being, you are moved. You are moved from a movement that is not out of attachment to the outcome or the result. It's just a true movement that rises up in you as something that is a movement that you cannot stop. It's but it's very subtle, because it doesn't come from the ego. It doesn't come from the identified separate sense of the little me. It's just like this conversation. The movement to say yes to this talk comes out of a true movement from where it comes from. It comes from the calling for awakening. I mean, as I say that, I can see that can easily be grabbed by the little me. But I think that each and every one really knows, if they really stop and check, where they're coming from.
Yes.
I gave up many, many years ago trying to fix my brother or trying to fix my family. And my family is all like that, you know? I gave up many years ago trying to change them and fix them. And I now totally meet them and feel all the pain that goes through them goes through me. And I don't try to fix that in myself. So it starts here. I don't try to fix the pain that moves through me in the first place. I allow it to move through me in the meeting of what is free to allow that.
Yeah.
And from here movement happens. I'm here for whoever, but I'm not here to support the same thing I won't support in myself, which is the little me who wants to fix and save the world.
Right.
I won't support in the other.
Right. Yes. What it sounds like is that by really being the human that you are also, that there's this human part that sometimes hurts, you know, and what we see the suffering of humanity, and if we let it come up close, because trying to fix keeps it really at a distance, you know, it's kind of like, let me make this better so I don't have to feel it. Not always, but sometimes. But when we let it come in, it cracks us open, and in that cracking open, and we let ourselves have the full humanity, you know, the fullness of our humanity and everybody's humanity, then a movement comes. We see if a movement comes from that.
Yes.
Then that's a true movement of being, of being in your heart, which is genuine and authentic and has integrated the pain. You know, because what we learn is to bypass the pain. Like those particular teachings, they can be used to bypass pain or bypass inconvenience. You know,
a lot of the spiritual search starts off to get away from the pain.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then where it ends up, really, or not ends up because there's no ending, but where it comes to is really knowing the freedom of you cannot ever separate yourself from humanity. So the more awake you get, the more pain is allowed or free to move through you. It's here anyway. It's never going to not be here.
Yes.
It's
and
just...
Yes. Yeah. And that's how the awakening, like as we call this, the embodied awakening, it never ends. Yes. And what I value so much about you, besides you're just such a beautiful being, is that I can really feel that through the depth of the suffering that you'd been able to, you know, just survive in a sense. At a point, I'm sure it felt like just surviving, but it has really widened your capacity for people to just bring whatever it is, so that in your presence, you know, when you're in the presence of somebody who has a wide capacity, it really feels, and I feel that with you, it's like that presence allows the nervous system to relax, you know, and the nervous system can then just bring, you know, in some new information so that it doesn't have to avoid, check out, jump out, you know, all of these things that we learn to go unconscious, to unenlighten ourselves, you know.
Yes.
And then that flowering,
I see more and more in the sharings that I'm doing every week, you know, what I see more and more is that I was, all this pain and suffering that's been experienced here and can still, I don't suffer, but pain comes through, has always been a preparation for the way that I meet the world. And for what I, as you just said, have the capacity to allow to be in the field that I share in. It all can come and come through. And through that, more beings meet that, and they come to know this same freedom. And what I've been seeing in the last meetings is that through that, they then are being prepared for the same meeting of their world and whoever comes into their world.
Oh, yes. That just gave me a chill.
And this is how life is freeing itself through so many beings. It's just like, it's like we're emptying out this stuff to make space for what we really are. And all that pain and suffering is the emptying out. It can't be jumped over.
Yeah.
And then there's more space for consciousness, and it's happening so fast. Just as you and I are igniting lots of candles, those candles are also lighting candles.
Yes.
It's so beautiful what's happening.
Yes, it really is. Yeah, and I'm just so touched by your story, and I'm not your story, your traveling, your journey, just how you are.
Well, I feel the same about yours, I have to say.
Just the way you are in this life, it's like you're a flowering flame. Yeah,
thank you.
Great. Love. Okay.
Thank you. Love to all of you.